All right, Isaac Harris, we're continuing on our draft profiles. EJ Liddell, 6'7", forward from Ohio State. He played 3 years there. He is weighing in at 243 pounds, a built 243 pounds. His wingspan is just about 7 feet. He has an 8'7" standing reach. He's going to be 21 and a half years old at the time of the draft. He's coming in a little bit older. But the one sentence description from The Ringer and NBA.com, I kind of mixed it together. A pick and pop or small ball 5, strong framed forward who made significant strides as a 3-point shooter and a shot blocker as a junior at Ohio State to complement his interior scoring ability. Last 2 years at OSU, he didn't play a ton his freshman year, but the last 2 years he played 61 total games, averaged just about 18 points, 7 boards, over 2 assists, just about 2 blocks. He shot 48% from the field, 36% from 3 with the two combined years, 76% from the free throw line, and just about 31 minutes. Isaac, what are some strengths and weaknesses you see in EJ Liddell's game?
Yeah, I mean, you look at EJ and you say, hey, can he be your small ball 5? You alluded to it earlier, and he has this body, 6'6", 6'7", and you see see the 240, you see him on the floor, and you're like, all right, is this like an Ohio State Grant Williams? That name gets thrown out a lot. PJ Tucker, a Paul Millsap. Can he be of that mold? But then you see, like, he's a better athlete than Grant Williams. I mean, he averaged 2.6 blocks a game. Like, for a 6'6", 6'7" guy with, and obviously there's the wingspan comes in play with that, but he's so smart. He's so smart with his timing. He's a good help defender. Weak side, help blocker there. And, he shot 38% from 3 last year, so he can do the pick and pop. That his strengths is watching the role that Grant Williams is having for Boston and this team's in the finals and saying, hey, can I have that role, on a good team moving forward myself? I think one of the bigger things for you to watch, for people to watch out there, if you're going to watch EJ Liddell, watch his game against Paolo. How he defended Paolo. There's some moments that he just stuffed Paolo. I mean, he gave him problems. And, Banchero's about to go top 3 in the draft. I mean, I would almost take Banchero number 1 in the draft. And
Banchero as like an offensive initiator, like that's his thing.
Yeah. And that's one of the cool things about Liddell is he thought about coming out of the draft last year after sophomore season. I read this interview and he even said, he's like, I need to get better at being a better defender. I need to get better at my outside shooting. He went back to school, bet on himself, and he did that. And now he's coming back. He's a better draft. I mean, he was projected like 2nd round pick last year. Now he's going to go in the 1st round. Heck, he might push, in the teens there, 16 to 20 somewhere. But that's going to be his strengths. When you look at his weaknesses, he's not an eye-popping athlete in the sense of he still struggles a little bit with his lateral quickness when he switches onto smalls. You're not giving him the ball and saying he's not Draymond in the sense of you're not going to let him bring it up to court and say, run the offense and do all this. Even though he's a smart player, he's just not that type of player. So that's why I didn't throw Draymond out there. But Grant Williams is thrown out there, but he's a better shot blocker and athlete than Grant Williams too. So I'm not in love with that, but that's kind of like the mold of some of them.
Yeah. A couple things that are in there. He also wanted to improve his 3-point shot. That's a big thing. Like he took 26 threes his first year where he played, he played 31 games, but he only played 16 minutes a game. Then he took 80 threes the next year. He took 123 threes this past year, and he shot 37% this past year on threes. So he wanted to really add that. He's 2-time All Big Ten first team. He was 1 out of 15 players on the Wooden Award, the final ballot there this past year. And then he was all Big Ten defensive team as well this past year. The shot block timing, like you said, he is a good passer and is a pretty good post player too. But like he has a jumper. So like some of these guys that we talk about, the PJ Tuckers, the guys like this, he like EJ Liddell sometimes will like do a turnaround jumper in the lane. You're like, what is happening? Like this is not the archetype of a guy that should be able to do that. But yeah, he's the weaknesses, like you said. The other thing that stuck out as a weakness His handle is loose, like for NBA standards. That was a ringer weakness from him. That he's not like an offensive initiator where he can handle in space and do all this kind of stuff. So he can do like a little bit of everything on offense, but there's nothing that stands out. It's like, oh, we can trust him to do, to drive in space or to get to the rim or to pull up from three or pull up in the lane. Like all those things he can do kind of well, but not super well. And so you're stuck with a really interesting player. And I got a comp for you that molds a couple guys that I'm really interested to see what you think about it. The availability for EJ Liddell. Raphael had him 33rd on his big board a little while ago. The Ringer has him 21st. ESPN mocked him at 23, and then The Athletic had him at 32. So somewhere between 20 and 30. So the end of the draft, right where the Mavericks are. It just takes one team to take him, but he could be available for the Mavericks. Okay, comps. You mentioned PJ Tucker. I think that's a good one. He's a little bit bigger than PJ Tucker, but still, like that's the type of player he'd have to be. Grant Williams, another one you mentioned. Paul Millsap was one I think the Ringer had as kind of a comp, like early Paul Millsap. Thad Young was one that Richard sent me, Mavs draft. That's kind of an interesting one for him. But here's mine. Here's mine. You ready for this?
I'm ready.
If Montrezl Harrell and Draymond Green met in the middle and somehow found a jumper along the way. Because he has the like finisher on the basket stuff that Montrezl Harrell has, like the long arms. But he's a way better defender, and he's got a little bit more of a jumper than Montrezl Harrell. And he's got the Draymond, like he can pass, he can defend on the perimeter, but he's not that good. But so he's like somewhere in the middle defensively between Montrezl Harrell and Draymond Green, and offensively he's in the middle of those guys too.
Yeah, he's like a better version of Eric Pascal.
That's a good one too. Yeah.
It's just that mold. Like we're all sitting there listening and talking about this, understanding like the small ball five, the bigger body small ball five, that he can hold his own in the paint because he is 240, but he can also move on the perimeter and he can hit a shot. And that's where I think he could surprise some people about where he goes. I think like if he went, 15, 16, 17, I wouldn't be shocked because guys like him are so serviceable, especially in the playoffs. And you say like, why should Dallas take him? Because he gives you another option at that small ball five step to where it doesn't have to be Dorian every time. Like, I don't think EJ Liddell is going to start anytime soon, but it's like, man, if you're bringing Liddell off the bench, like he's everything and more of what you thought Sterling Brown could be. And another, bigger body wing defender that you can, play out there with Dorian. You can play out there with Reggie Bullock. And so, yeah, man, I think he's when you look at a rotation of like an 8-man rotation, you're looking at like a, 4, probably 5 to 7 man in that rotation somewhere. And he would fit great in Dallas, but he's also one of those dudes that I think would fit with pretty much any really good team.
Well, and that's the thing too, right? It's going to take him a little bit because all of his skills that he brings to the NBA, you have to be so good at all of those things. Like think about the guys we've mentioned: PJ Tucker, Paul Millsap, Grant Williams, Montrezl Harrell, Draymond Green. All these guys, the similar frame and build. You have to be so good and elite at a couple things, and it's going to take him a little while to get there. Like even Grant Williams, it took him like 2 years before he was really an impact rotation player for the Celtics this past year. And finally, had a kind of a breakout this past year, but even like a breakout just as a role player, right? So it's going to take a little while for him. If we start looking at why the Mavs should take him, why the Mavs shouldn't take him, this is why I think if he's there at 26, the Mavs should take him because they're going to bet on his work ethic, that he'll become the next PJ Tucker, Draymond type that's like a perfect small ball 5, but can also score off the dribble in the post or from 3. Like he gives you all those different options, and defensively he gives you like a versatile defender that has really good instincts around the rim. Why the Mavs shouldn't take him? He's too slow to guard in the perimeter, too small to guard in the post. The shot isn't clean enough to be a 3-and-D guy, and his post work isn't viable enough to get you buckets in the NBA. You have to be insanely good defensively to make it work as a PJ Tucker, Grant Williams, Draymond Green type in the NBA. And if that doesn't pan out, which I was texting with Richard, Mavs draft, about him, and he said he's not sold on his defense at all at the next level. And so if you're not sold on his defense, then there's no chance you take him.
Yeah, in a way, he's like a smaller Jalen Williams. We did Christian Coloco and Jalen Williams on yesterday's pod, and it's like, you watch him, he's like, he has these instincts to where that's the reason why you shouldn't, in the sense of, all right, well, he's not elite at this, he's not elite at that, but he's good at all of these things. And I think he's good enough at all the things where he would be a great pick. I believe in him. I listened to Titus and Tate. I used to love their pod back in the day.
I listened to the same thing.
And obviously Titus, when, Ohio State guy and everything. And, just him talking about how much respect, how much he loves EJ Liddell, talking about his work ethic a lot and how he's like, man, whatever you tell EJ to do, he's going to do it. He's going to learn it and everything. So I think one of the takeaways from the past few weeks for EJ Liddell is EJ Liddell ranked all the MCU movies. And so if we want to talk about, we could go on the next 10 minutes of
talk
this.
About his judgment, right? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah. If we want to knock his judgment in life or in movie watching, then we can talk about that, because literally all the MCU, list, he ranked them from his favorite on down to the bottom. He doesn't have Morbius at the end, so that's one knock right there. But shout out to Ant-Man and the Wasp being the number one MCU movie.
That was EJ Liddell's number one MCU movie.
So anyway, we could break that down. Winter Soldier is kind of like farther down his list. I'm like, all right, I liked you. I might have to move you down a few levels, but no, he's great, man. I really like him. If Dallas walked away from the draft with EJ Liddell, I'd be pretty dang happy.
Oh, I would be too, because then okay, they're sold on all those things, and all those things, those tools that we just said, makes him to be a really valuable player in the NBA. If all that pans out and he can defend on the NBA at a really high level like he did in college, and the three-point shot works out, and then he adds a little bit off the dribble, and then he adds a little bit in the post, and all of a sudden that's a really dynamic player that can be your fourth or fifth option in a starting lineup, and that's a guy that can play in the playoffs. And so you can see the archetype of a type of guy that the Mavs would want and really need, right? He could be the guy that sort of fills in for Maxey when Maxey eventually can't be in the lineup anymore. So that's what I'm seeing from EJ Liddell. He's a really interesting prospect. We'll see where he goes. He might not be there for the Mavericks anyway, but that's our profile on him. We'll do a bunch more profiles. Let us know in the comments below who you want us to profile next. Thanks for making Locked On Mavs your first listen. Make sure to go check out the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. They know these guys way better than us. Check out Rafael Barlow and Richard Mavs Draft, who I've been talking about all throughout this, with drafts, mock drafts, player rankings, and of course, big boards. It's Locked On NBA Big Board, wherever you get your podcast. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs.
Peace out.
Boom!